Hello, and welcome to this session that's looking a little bit more in depth into observational and action research methods which could be used for your research project. What we'll be looking at this session is giving some insight and guidance into the different variables within observational research and action research. When you're looking at this, you should be in the process of thinking about which methods you are using for your research topic, your problem, your opportunity, and your issue. Observation might be one of them. You might be looking at this to discount this, or you might not be looking at it because you are really interested in observational research and you think it will help your research project to achieve its research objectives. And the same goes for action research. You might be considering action research and you're just trying to get a bit of an insight. And this is what this is trying to give you, a little bit of an insight so you can go off, read about it a bit more and decide whether or not these techniques will be useful. First one we'll look at is observational research. Now, observational research is defined as a systematic observation, recording, description, and analysis and interpretation of people's behaviour. Observation, as it says on the tin, is about watching people and watching situations and trying to understand what's going on and trying to understand their behaviour, or just understand what actually is going on within a situation. And there's two major types of observational research you can look at. The first one is participant observation, and the second one is structured observation. The first one, participant observation, is much more inductive in its approach. In other words, inductive, if you remember, the inductive research approach is where we're trying to understand what's going on, we're trying to understand the meaning of what's going on, okay? We're not doing the deductive approach, which is basically testing and getting figures and hypothesis testing. The second one, structured research, is much more deductive in nature, okay? And what I mean by deductive, this is where we're gathering figures. We're trying to understand what is actually going on in terms of the figures, and it's much more qualitative. So we're gathering numbers here, okay? Many people will be interested in both of these, and again, what we'll do is just going to give you some brief insight to what they're about and how you can do them. In terms of participant observation, okay, we're mainly using this to try and understand what's going on within a social setting. Now, what do we mean by social setting? We're meaning a board of directors, a group of managers, people on the tills at Sainsbury's. Maybe that we've got a research problem or opportunity that is looking acutely at a certain number of the people. It could be consumers. It could be consumers shopping around Asda. It could be consumers shopping on the internet. It could be consumers using a smartphone and how they understand and how they use a smartphone. So we're trying to observe what's going on. Okay, so we can work out what's actually happening when they're using a smartphone, or when they're shopping in Asda, or when these employees are using a till. What's actually going on? And because it's participant observation, that means we're actually participating in the situation. We actually may be one of the till workers themselves. We may be a consumer ourselves. So we're actually involved in the situation as well as observing it. Okay, and of course, when you're actually immersed in the situation, you're actually involved in the situation, you get more of a richer understanding of what's going on. You get to feel the emotions. You get to understand the actual situation much better, and that's great for research because it gets you far more depth. However, one of the disadvantages with depth is you're recording a lot more detail, and that, of course, is time consuming. So that's one of the problems we've got here. So we're immersing ourselves into these situations in order to understand what's going on and possibly why it's going on as well for participant observation. We're trying to comprehend or understand and actually explain the behaviour that is happening. So some examples of participant observation. So we might want to understand what the bonus system is within a factory or a machine shop. We might be doing research over in Bangladesh. I'm not saying go over to Bangladesh and do it, but you might be doing research in Bangladesh, looking at these machine shops where they're making certain companies' clothing. What's the culture there? How they paid? What's the bonus system? Because it's nothing that we don't know. We don't know what it's about. We know something's gone on, but we need to know what it's about. Understand how it's working. So that could be something. Next one here, understanding the drama in advertising agencies. So we're looking at understanding the culture. So obviously we're going to go to an advertising agency. We're going to spend some time there. We're going to get immersed into the situation, understand what's going on, get a feeling for what's going on, observe what's going on as someone that's within the setting, and the drama being what's the dramatic situations that are happening, how do they come up with these crazy ideas, is there arguments, if there are political tensions that come up with these ideas, is there a drama for a start with. So we're trying to understand what's actually how an advertising agency works and the characters that might be involved. You'll probably notice a lot of TV programs, documentaries, Channel 4, stuff like this, these fly-on-the-wall documentaries, are very much so participant observational research, but they're just made for TV. They're understanding a certain system. If you look at, I think it was Benefit Street on Channel 4, again, observing the lives and the behaviour of these individuals on that certain street in Birmingham, which just happened to be claiming benefits. There's also all sorts of boardroom documentaries where they're following managers around in a business and seeing what they're doing and how they behave and how they make decisions. And again, very interesting, because different managers, different companies, different industries will act differently, and that's the interesting piece of the research: how they're doing it and why they're doing it. There could also be other things. I mean, I've seen observational research where people are observing consumers and how they use electronic devices, in such as the iPad, a smartphone, and they're using eye tracking research and eye tracking technology within very big technological departments of universities, where they can track the eye and where it's going and avoiding adverts and stuff like that. So they're actually trying to observe the minutiae of eye movement across the screen to see what's happening. So that is observational research. You're observing what's happening. It might be just simple as you're working in a marketing department and you've been reading about how managers make decisions, especially marketing decisions, and you want to observe and understand how people make marketing decisions in the company that you're working at. Are they effective? Are they different? And is there anything different there compared to what you're reading in the literature? And of course, especially in business, consumers are really important in how consumers behave and understanding how they behave and just what they do within a store, within a website, wherever they may be. Is an amazing thing to have as a piece of knowledge and intelligence for a business. So it might be just trying to observe consumers and what they're doing and how they behave by pushing a trolley around the store, or even how they behave when they're going through a website. I mean, a lot of websites will just simply track the path in which people go through to buy a good. Now, what is the path? Do they take 5 steps? Do they take 10 steps? Is there different type of people that use different types of path? Can you kind of cluster them into different groups of people who take different paths? So it can be really interesting research. And again, observational research lends itself to a lot of different problems. So this might be something that you use for your research, or it might not be. Now, when it comes to the first type of observational research, the participant observation, that actually gets broken down into 4 major types that you can look at and consider. So it gets a little bit more complex, but don't worry. Generally, we have to make a decision on 2 things. The first thing is whether the research actually is going to be taking part in the activities or in what's happening in the company. Okay, so that's the first thing, whether you're actually going to be taking part in the activity or you're not, you're just simply observing on the sidelines. That's the first decision. The other one is to whether you're going to reveal the aim of your research. Are you revealing your identity to everyone else there, that you are researching this and you're going to be watching people and you're going to be asking them questions as they go along? Is that something you want to do? Or if you do that, will it affect the behaviour? Will they not show the behaviour that you want them to show or you think they're going to show? So there's 2 things you need to think about in terms of participant observation. The first one is, are you going to take part and work and do the same things as everyone else in this setting or in this company or in wherever it is? And the second one is, are you going to tell people about your intentions, that you're doing research and it's about this, or are you not going to tell them? And depending on the answer to those questions depends on which type of observational role you're going to take. And we'll take these 4 individually. So we've got 4 here. We've got the participant as an observer, Now, the participant as an observer here, the researcher's role is revealed to everyone else there in the setting, in the research setting, and you're taking part. The research is actually taking part and actually mucking in with anyone else. You then got the observer as a participant in the lower left of the quadrant here. So the observer as a participant here is where the researcher observes the activity but doesn't take part, okay? And the reasons for their research and their identity is revealed to the setting. Okay. On the other side, okay, we've got complete participant. This is on the top right. This is where the researcher takes part in the setting, so he or she will muck in and work with the people in the company, or be the same as the consumers, or whatever they're doing. However, their identity and the reasons for their research is concealed. Okay, and then the last one in the right lower quarter of this quadrant, we're talking about complete observer. Complete observer is where we are not taking part, we're just observing on the sidelines, so we're not actually doing what everyone else is doing, who we're observing, and we've got our identity concealed as well. Okay, now we'll take you through these little roles and see which ones you think you might want to use or may not want to use. So the first one, complete participant. Now, if you're choosing a complete participant, basically you are taking part. Now, taking part in the activities within the company. Now, this is fantastic if you work for a company part-time, you have an internship, you're working there, and you're actually trying to understand what's going on. Okay, you work there, you've got some depth knowledge, you're working with people so you can observe the behaviours and the decisions that are made, or whatever's happening, whatever you want to observe is great. However, with a complete participant, you're also concealing your identity. Now, my advice is, this is where ethics kick in a little bit, because it's a little bit like spying. That's the ethical decision here. You're spying. Now, there is certain settings where it may work. For example, at the bottom of this slide, there's an example here. You know, you're talking about there's a drinking culture. In some industries, there's a drinking culture. So at dinner time, a lot of workers, maybe even high-powered workers with high responsibility, may go out and drink at lunchtime, alcoholic drinks. Now, this was happening with the airline industry. And the only way they were being caught was through complete participants. So someone was working with them, air stewards, or they were a member of staff with these airline crews. They were going with them to lunch or whenever, dinner time, you know, drinking with them, and then absolutely observing them going onto planes and actually driving planes drunk. So, I mean, this was a few years ago, but if we told them that I was a researcher and we were looking at the behaviour of pilots, they wouldn't probably be drinking because they know it's bad. So if it's affecting the behaviour and it's something quite serious, like the airline pilot situation, then it may be better to conceal your identity. But in most 9 out of 10 cases, it's considered spying, and you actually should tell them, I'm going to do some research here. You know, I'm researching this and the other. Do you mind if I take part here? I'm just going to be, you know, seeing what's happening and see how you behave, because I'm trying to understand how we make decisions and, you know, things like that. So it's fine to brief them and ask them for authorization. You should never really not ask for authorization, only in very extreme cases. So just be careful a little bit here. So, complete participant, you take part in the situation. So great if you've got a part-time job, great if you've got an internship, but you actually are concealing your identity and your reasons for your research, because if you did actually tell people why you were doing it, they probably would change their behaviour. Usually used in naughty cases when we're trying to catch out people and they're doing something naughty. So 9 times out of 10, I don't think many people will be using this one in a normal research kind of unit that we would have at an undergraduate level. The next one is complete observer. Now, a complete observer is where you don't take part, okay? You stand on the sidelines and watch people. But your identity is concealed, okay? So you're not telling them that they're watching them. Again, it has little ethical issues. And my advice is to avoid those ethical issues and actually, you know, tell people the purpose of the research and why you're doing it, because that just makes it, you know, far more simpler for everyone else. It's the accusation of spying that's the problem with here. Again, used in naughty cases where, you know, if we did say who we were, what we were doing, they probably wouldn't, you know, they wouldn't act in the way they normally act. So that's the problem here. So again, ethical issue. The difference here with complete observer is we're not taking part. We are watching them probably from afar, and this is kind of like detective type stuff. So, again, not many projects that will warrant this one, but it's worth talking about anyway, so you don't get confused. So you don't take part in the situation, and you don't tell anyone what you're doing. So it has ethical problems that you might be spying. Again, try to avoid these if you can because of the ethical issues. However, the ones that you can go for are things like observer as a participant. Okay, now this one here is where you attend a research setting to observe, but it's revealed. You have to forgive me, it's not concealed, it's revealed. Moving on to the set of observational techniques that you could use, where you have a reveal to the setting, to the company or to the consumers, your identity and what the research is about. My advice is to avoid any ethical issues, that you avoid the concealment ones. You don't. It's a bit risky, okay? Because we don't want you being charged with all sorts of spying allegations. So that's a little bit problematic. So my best advice is to stick to these two here: observer as a participant and participant as an observer. In the first one, the observer as a participant, the researcher doesn't take part, so they're stood on the sidelines and they're observing. But the identity of the research and the reasons for the research is actually revealed. So this tends to be used when they're looking at consumers. So you're watching consumers, you're seeing what they're doing, how they're behaving within a store, stuff like that. Everyone knows as they're going to the store, there's probably going to be posters saying there's some research here. We're looking at this, we'll be observing you. If you have a problem with that, please talk to such and such, and they'll advise you when the store isn't being observed. So, there's ways around of telling people why you're doing the research to reveal it. But you don't take part here. As an observer as a participant, you don't take part. You're just observing what people are doing. And you're observing what's happening. You're jotting down insights of what they're doing. You may be recording it through film. Again, put that on the posters, or make sure you tell people that they're being filmed. So this is one way. This is like Big Brother. Okay, there's cameras all over the place. You're watching people, but they know that you're being watched, and they know that you're being subject to some form of research. So that's that one, and it's a little bit good because it's quite. One of the advantages of this one is that because you're not actually doing anything in the situation, you're not working with the consumers, you're not doing anything with them, you're not participating, you're not taking part. You can strike up conversations, you can have little discussions, you can ask questions a little bit more of what they're doing. You can watch them a little bit more intently. And therefore you can get some understanding of what they are doing and why they're possibly doing it, because you're not actually doing it with them. You're actually, you're just observing them. One of the downsides with observer as a participant is because you're revealed as the researcher and everyone knows what you're doing, they might change their behaviour. And of course you don't get a true reflection or a true account of what they're actually doing, and that's one of the downsides. But you can acknowledge that within your research project. The next one, again, it's a revealed one where the researcher is. Everyone knows what the researcher is doing, and what's their role and why they're doing it. But this one here, this is where the researcher takes part in the situation. So this is great if you have part-time jobs. Great if you have an internship, you're working, making decisions, doing marketing campaigns, doing accountancy or whatever, and you're trying to understand as part of being that participant in the situation, trying to understand how this thing works, whatever you're looking at. So it's great because you're taking part, you can actually understand it a lot better. You're also observing not only what you're doing but also what everyone else is doing. And how things are happening. So it's quite good because you're actually heavily involved in the situation. You're working with these people, so you do have time to talk to them. And again, because everyone knows what you're doing, you're quite free to write things down, make observations, and actually write your notes down while you're going. Whereas if you're concealed, you wouldn't do that. You'd have to wait to the end of the day. So the problem is with this participant as an observer, because you're taking part. And it depends on what you're taking part in, whether it's making decisions, whether it's in a care home, whether it's in a supermarket, whatever you're doing, whatever you're taking part in. Because you're taking part in it, might not be so easy to make the notes, and you may forget them because you've got to concentrate on the job you're doing. So you've just got to build that factor in and dedicate time to somehow having a strategy to collect the data a little bit more accurate. So that's one of the problems. So participant as an observer, you take part in the situation, you work with everyone, you do your normal job, but you're observing what's happening, you're asking questions to understand what you need to understand for your research project. As I say, really stick to the ones that are revealed, stick to the other observer as a participant, where you don't take part, you observe, you tell everyone what's happening so you don't have any ethical issues, and you stick to participant and observer, where you take part and you reveal what's happening. Some major considerations. Okay, now the first one is, how does this fit with your research aim and objectives? And remember, the big golden rule with putting together a research topic is choosing research methods, okay, that will answer and help you achieve your research objectives. Okay, remember we went through a session where we put research objectives together. You know, these objectives in the middle, we're talking about investigating, understanding, to identify those type of research objectives. We need to then put a research method to them. Not a problem. Observational research might help you. It might help you to achieve your research objectives. It might help you with your practical problem, opportunity, or issue. It might not. Not a problem. You don't have to use it, and that's the point of listening to this. So first thing is, with any research method that you might be listening to through these recordings, then think, will it help me try to get the data, the best data I need, the most appropriate data I need to answer my research objective? Okay? And if not, either change your method or change your research objective. It's your project. It's no right or wrong answer. You just need to make it all connect together. The second one, with observational research, it's time consuming, hugely time consuming. If you imagine with the participant observation research, you actually having to participate within a social setting. That means you have to get into a job, you have to know what you're doing, you have to work with them. Really time consuming. Of course, can take a long time to get settled in, and of course take all this research down. And of course it's very rich data. If you imagine working just one day in Starbucks, the amount of observations you could record, you might be going home at night and spending 2 hours on a dictaphone telling them about your day and what you observed. So can be hugely time consuming in terms of data collection. Also, think about your research project. Would you have confidence in working, trying to observe the board of directors at ICI? And would you have confidence in trying to participate with the board of directors at ICI? Probably not at this level. So, you've got to be realistic in what you can achieve. Great if you've got part-time jobs, great if you've got an internship, fine, you've got access and you're quite confident and competent within the position you're in, and that's a great project, so it matches up. But if you're starting off from the outset, you don't have a company where you could go and do some observational research, you don't have any links or opportunities to do that, then I would think twice a little bit about it. Access, really important. Don't design a project saying I want to do some observation at Vodafone. Vodafone, you write to Vodafone, they don't care. They don't give a monkeys. There's hundreds of thousands or millions of undergraduate research projects going on all over the time. And remember the first few recordings where we looked at trying to set you up on a research project. Be realistic. Don't bite off too much you need to, because it will cause absolute havoc. So be realistic about access. Use observational research if you have a part-time job, or you have an internship, or you have a good relationship with a company where you can go and do some observational research, and they're happy if you do that. And of course, that's one that I've been talking about quite a lot, is the ethical considerations. Remember, concealing your identity as an observer is one of the big no-nos at the minute, because it's considered as spying. Now, in some situations, very rare situations in terms of going to be 1%, if any of you who are listening to this, you might be researching something that is a bit naughty. It might be racism, it might be biases towards certain consumers, or something like that. Then fine. But there are tricky topics, and don't make life hard for yourself. The best way to get a good mark with this is to keep it simple, and actually almost keep it safe. Follow the process, follow the steps, but just do it in a simple project. You make it too complicated, it will be really hard to put together. So do something interesting but relatively simple and straightforward. In terms of the data collection, when you're looking at any of the observational methods that we've been going through, there's some advice here. The first one is they talk about two sets of observations. The first one is primary observations. What happened, what was said, at what time, when did it happen, in what situation. So you're just taking a very objective description of what actually happened when you were there, what you observed. Okay, it's very objective, it's the facts of the matter sort of thing. And then there's a secondary observation. So, and these are separated. So you put down what actually happened, the facts of the situation, what you saw from your perspective, and what people said. And then the secondary one is, what do you think? What did it mean? What are your thoughts on that? That's the researcher's involvement. And of course, in your writing these, and these are generally written in a journal, so you have a book or a computer, you're writing up these notes every day you've been participating, observing. You'd write primary observation, this is what happened today, this happened at this time, this is what thing he said, this is what that said, da da da. Then second paragraph, clearly labelled, secondary observation, these are my thoughts on this. I thought this. I thought that was wrong. I thought that, this doesn't seem right compared to what I've been reading in the literature compared to that theory, but it seemed to work. Those kind of things. So one of them is the objective stuff. The second one is about thoughts and interpretations on what you saw and what you actually witnessed. And of course, there's different ways of actually recording this data. So you can do it, handwrite it in your own kind of work pad or notebook. You can video record it. You could video record yourself. You've probably seen this on a lot of documentaries. They've been going out. You've asked a celebrity to climb Mount Everest. They're in their tent at night. They've got their video camera. They are a participant observation. They are actually taking part in this mountain climbing. They've got a camera at night and they'll do a video diary. This is what we did. This is how we did it. This is my thoughts and feelings. It was hard. I'm tired and stuff like that. So you could do it like that. You could do it through a voice recorder. It usually they're fine. And technology can help you make these things more efficient. So you don't have to keep writing these things down. You might want to use a mixture of them. So you're at work, you're participating, you're working out how people are making decisions. You're making little notes on notepads at work because that's what you've got time to. You can do. And then at night you go and do a video diary. Not a problem. You can decide how you want. Not a problem. The advantages of observational research and when you would use them is generally for kind of inductive questions. Remember that the inductive approach is about understanding, the comprehension type questions. What we're trying to understand what's going on, what's happening. We're trying to understand people's behavior, maybe understand people's emotions slightly, but mainly understanding what's actually going on somewhere in a company or in a supermarket, whatever it is you're trying to observe, a football stadium, wherever it might be. Generally good when you have access to somewhere. So many of you may have relationships with companies that you've done work with before. Fine. Even if it's just a part-time job in Starbucks and McDonald's, there is a research project to get out of it. So sometimes the best research projects are about understanding where I have access. And going to those, thinking about what could I do in here? What could I do at McDonald's? I did this, can I do something to help them, or can I do something to help them understand consumers a bit more by observing consumers or by even questioning consumers, whatever you think. So great when you have access, and you have access, this observational spatial research may be quite good for you. And again, you can experience real emotion. And actually, the big thing with observational research is the depth and insight and the detail. And you're really getting under the skin what's actually happening. A lot of people may have never realised what's happening behind the scenes at McDonald's and understanding the whole process behind it. Again, McDonald's have to say, yes, you can do that research, which is part of the ethical considerations here, but some things, getting some real insight into depth and understanding what's really going on is going to be some really valuable research. And remember, there's this term called contribution. Remember, you do your literature review, you work out what other people have researched in your area and what they understand by the area. You might be doing research which gives you deeper insights, better insights, and of course you can agree or disagree with some of the other academics in this area. The point of the literature review is to make you a fairly decent expert and have a great insight into what your subject's about, and therefore when you're doing the research, no matter how you do it, whether it's through observational research or through interviews or whatever it may be, you can agree or disagree with it. So it's great at getting that real understanding of what's actually happening. They might be doing things good, they might be doing things bad. That's fine. That's just part of the research process. The disadvantages, though, you must be aware of. It's time consuming, hugely time consuming. You've got to spend days and days and maybe even weeks in these situations. I'm not suggesting spend months, but if you're going to do observational research, start sooner rather than later. you've got to get the access. You can't just randomly say I'm going to do observational research within Sainsbury's. You must go through the procedure of asking Sainsbury's if this is okay, telling them what it's all about. Da da da. Again, that's your project planning. That's up to you. You get on with it, and it's all going to be accredited to your research project and your final mark. Obviously, there's ethical dilemmas. To be honest, if to make it easier, I would avoid anything that where you're concealed, unless it's a very an issue where it would be really problematic, and I would really avoid it by all costs. It's too dodgy at the minute for this kind of ethical research. And the last thing you want is you guys being held up for spying or anything like that. It's just don't want that. So be honest, stick to the methods where you are observing, but you're telling people what it's about, or you're taking part and you're observing and you're telling people what it's about. That's the much clear cut. And actually, there's an air of transparency, in business at the minute, that we must be transparent and we shouldn't be having these kind of behind the scenes type going on. So my advice is at this stage just to be honest and tell people and write to people and say, this is what it's about. Can I do this? 9 times 10 it'd be fine. There is sometimes a role conflict, because you imagine you've got two roles as a researcher and a participant. If you're actually working at Starbucks, or you're working whatever, a marketing agency or an accountancy firm, or whatever you're working, you've got a responsibility for your job. You're doing the job. You're working with these people, and you've also got the responsibility as a researcher. So you've got this conflict, because hopefully when you've read the literature on your topic, you understand the background, but actually you're working at this company and the academic stuff is saying stuff that's in disagreement with the industry stuff or what you're seeing. So you've got, what side do you take? And my opinion on this is it's very difficult, and you've got to detach yourself from both the researcher role and the participant role. You've got to see what the academics are saying. You've got to then see what's happening on the ground, and you've got to be like an upper tier, a higher order person looking over these two bits and seeing which one actually do I agree with. And you've got to try and remove that you actually are connected to both of them. So you've got to take that kind of that upper level stance to that, in terms of which side do I go for? Do I go for the academics, or do I go for what's happening on the ground? You've got to try and understand what's going to be the best way forward as an objective individual. So that can happen, so be careful of that. Observer bias. Now, this is where the researcher, who's obviously got quite involved in a setting, has made friends, and might be even getting a job out of this, can be a bit biased and think, well, yeah, everything at McDonald's do is great, everything at Tesco does is great, because I'm going to get a good job out of them when I come back. Now, that's observer bias. Now, you've got to avoid that. You've got to remain objective. You've got to say this is what happened, and by interpretation, this is the good side of it, and this is the bad side. So, you need to be very objective. This is what happened. Don't put any spin on it. Don't put interpretations. And then afterwards, this is the good side of it. This is the bad side. So you are taking a very holistic, what we call a holistic stance. You know the downsides and the good sides to what's actually happening here, and don't take any sides. Access and recording can be difficult. We talked about access. Getting access to some of these companies to actually participate is difficult. Some companies might say, no, we don't want to do research on this. It's confidential. It's our business. That's not fine. We don't want that in the public domain. If you are doing observational research and they say, yes, you can, but we want it to be confidential, then that's fine. The actual thesis, your actual research project will go no further than myself or another examiner who's examining your work at Pearson College. So one person at Pearson College. And then it will go to a second examiner for second marking, and then it will go to a third examiner, which is external. So, but again, if you mark everything confidential, it will go no further. And of course, we're all, as examiners and academics, we abide by some stringent rules on that. So, and if you're even more worried about that, then fine, just remove the name, just put Company A within Company A, which is a care home. Just put Company A. You cannot reveal the names and take away anything that can identify them. That's fine. But agree that between you as a student and the company that you're doing the work with, or the set of consumers, you have to agree that with them. That's something of your responsibility. In terms of recording being difficult, well, recording can be difficult because if you're participating and trying to observe at the same time, you've got a problem. So that's why I say you have to try and make notes as best you can, and spend some time after where you're working or whatever you're doing. You can write up your notes and more extensively to quickly get them down before you forget them. Remember we had participant observation. Now we've got this second one called structured observation. Now structured observation, it lends itself much more to the deductive approach of research. So remember we talked about, or you may have read about, the deductive approach to research is where people are trying to do hypothesis testing. They're trying to work out if there's a trend and they're trying to prove that trend it actually happens. Here the researcher doesn't get involved. They kind of detach themselves much more. So there's none of this, participating within a business or anything like that. You actually detach from the situation. And because it's deductive, remember one of the characteristics of deductive is that it's structured research and very systematic. And I'll show an example of that in a moment. And what you're trying to do is you're observing what's happening, and then you're trying to categorize or quantify the behavior. Can you put it into a category? Can you tick a box? And what you're doing is trying to understand what is actually happening, not why, but what. And I'll show you some examples. Here's an example. So you might be observing some people within a restaurant. So we say about a chain of restaurants. We could be, I don't know, let's go back to Burger King or McDonald's. You are observing, you have this little, you've devised this sheet of categories, and you're going to tick some boxes. So here, you observe, did they smile and make eye contact with you? Yes or no? Did they greet the customer? Yes or no? Did you think they gave the customer undivided attention? Yes or no? Did they suggest extra items? Yes or no? So you are basically it's much more black and white, much more categorized. With the participant observation, you're recording everything that's going on. That's why it's time consuming. Here, you're putting together a pre-categorization of behavior. Now that might come from what the company expects of these employees. It might come from the literature. What literature says, this is what a person who serves someone in a restaurant should be behaving like. This is good customer services. You take that from the literature, you put together this table. You then go and observe these employees within McDonald's. You obviously tell them that's going on, and you watch them, and you simply tick the boxes and see what they're doing, and then any comments that gives you any more detail. So far more structured, but it's aiming to get, have I got 10 yeses for greets the customer, or have I got 10 no's suggesting there's a problem there, and then you've got to address why that's a problem. Again, here's another example of a recording sheet. Here you've got for a structured observation. Again, you've got your categories, taking initiative, brainstorming. Did you witness these things? Tick the box for which group that did it. So here we're looking at the different group members. So it's a group situation. It could be a team of managers doing an exercise. You're observing them. They're not given by name. They're A, B, C, and D. And if you see Manager A taking initiative, tick the box. If you see Manager C challenging or seeking justification from someone else, then tick the box. That's what we're trying. It's a much easier way of kind of doing that. So, but it's highly structured, and the problem with it is that you actually you're losing the meaning. You're just ticking boxes, and who's to say there's not more categories? Whereas in the participant observation, which is much more of a inductive approach, you are getting understanding of what's actually happening. You're not trying to focus it down into certain categories. You're getting a fuller understanding. So, the more popular is the participant observation, which is more freer, much more flexible. This one is a bit too restrictive, but you might like it. Okay, now I want you to pause a little bit and spend a bit of time, 10 minutes or so, pause the recording, and just think about, is observational research going to be appropriate to your research topic, problem, opportunity, or issue? If it's not, say why not? Why don't you think? And if it is, then justify why. How does it fit? Where would it fit? Have you got the access? Remember, the big important part when you're writing up your research method is that you justify your research methods. You justify why you're using this, and the one way to justify why something is good is by saying why the other things, the other research methods, aren't very good and where they have weaknesses. So that's the point of the exercise here. Now, if you don't want to do it, then fine, don't worry. But carry on into the next section. But just if you want to spend 10 minutes thinking about how can observational research help me with my objectives. Could I do it? And would it be possible? And what would I get from it? And would it help me meet my objectives? And would it help me with my problem, opportunity, or issue? That's the key. Moving on, we're looking at the second topic here, and that's action research. Now, action research is connected to a lot of other little methodologies. Action research is partly observational research. It's partly case study research. It's a bit of a mixed bag, but I'll take you through what action research is, and then you can obviously decide on whether you would like to do it or not. Action research is, and I'll take the first one. It's partly case study research. Now remember that case study research is where you're focusing on one company, usually, or one industry. You're focusing on a certain situation. You're not focusing on several companies across the world or several companies across a sector. It's case study if you're focusing on something quite detailed, quite specific. Here, with action research, it's definitely case study research. The reason for it is with action research, you are actually taking part in the situation. You are helping to make decisions. You're actually doing the work. So it's very much participant observation. However, you are not only looking at the actions of people you're working with, okay, but you're looking at the actions of yourself and how your behavior and your decisions are having an impact, or where you may be making mistakes. So a lot of action research is used to actually understand your own way of doing things. This is mainly inductive approach research. It's not deductive. One of the characteristics of deductive research is that the research is totally separate from what you're researching. So you don't actually have an influence on it. You don't mess it up. You don't influence the behavior there. With action research, you're actually working at the company. You are recording and understanding what you're doing, as well as all the other managers and all the other people around you. So it is very much you're taking part in the situation, but you're recording and observing your actions, the outcomes of your actions, and your thoughts and emotions, as well as everyone else around you. So it is very all-involving research method. So, one of the big things, you need to have somewhere you can actually work and make decisions that relates to your topic. Now, it takes a very structured form, action research, and there's slightly different versions of this. So, what generally happens with action research is you go through it in stages. So, imagine you're researching decision making in a marketing agency. So you're working on a campaign, you've got an internship there, and your research project is just simply to understand how people come up with a creative campaign. Because there's some amazingly creative marketing campaigns out there. But what's the process? Now you're working there. You want to actually become an advertising executive. So you want to actually develop your experience here. Action research also helps you develop your experience because you're researching you taking part in the situation. So what tends to happen is you go in these kind of cycles. You start off with having a plan. This is what I'm going to do. And then you implement that plan. Now that plan could be developed between you and other managers or you and other people. You implement that plan. You record what happened when you implemented it. You observe it. And of course, you get the outcomes of that plan. Did sales drop? Did sales go up? What actually happened? Did we have an argument? What happened? And of course, you reflect on that. In other words, when it talks about reflecting, we talk about, right, did this go well? What do we think it went well? So there's some reflective activities. So you go round in this cycle, and of course, it just keeps going. Again, it's quite time consuming. You need a placement to work in. You need to be doing it. But one of the big benefits is that you can make a difference. You are going into that company to make a difference. A lot of academic consultants use this because they can get a research project out of a consultancy. So when you go into consultancy, they'll have a plan, what they're going to pose to the managers. They'll go and implement that plan with the help of the rest of the company. They'll observe the outcomes of that, good or bad, and then of course reflect on the outcomes to see what they can change next, and then they go to the next cycle, and so on and so on. And at each stage, plan, act, observe, reflect, and some of these stages sometimes have a different terminology, so don't worry about it. You're recording things. What was my plan? I wrote it down in the journal. I made a video diary, whatever it was. we're going to implement it today. I made a record of what happened. We had this problem, we have that problem. Actually, this went well. So, and it's great for understanding what people are doing, to understanding what's actually happening. You could use this, a lot of businesses in terms of, it is mainly managerial decision making. So it's slightly different to observational research because you're not just observing yourself, you're actually trying to make a difference to a company that you're working in. You're observing what you're doing and how you've behaved and if it went wrong or not. So you're learning yourself. So it's actually partly researching you, but also it's partly researching the others around you and the whole situation of what you did and how you changed things and what went wrong and who said that. So in terms of the recording of the data, again, it's a journal. You're writing entries on a daily basis in a journal. It can be really, really time consuming. So again, that's just to advise you how that works. But for some of you, your problem might be that your company has falling internet sales. So you are part of a team that tries to improve that. So action research, just every stage, you've done a plan, you've acted, you observe, you keep going around these cycles, you make notes, and that becomes your research data. So it can be useful if if you're in a good position at a company. Again, it's up to you, completely up to you. There's no right or wrong to say that you should do this. But if it helps you with your research project, with your research objectives, your topic, your opportunity, your issue, fantastic, go for it. Again, if you want to pause for a few moments, consider action research and consider where it would be useful for your problem, opportunity, issue. Could you use it? Could you have access? Would it be ideal to use this one? If not, then why not? Remember, the big thing with the research method, whatever methods you choose, and it's totally up to you, you need to justify them and say why you chose these and why these are the best to get the data I need to answer my research question, to understand and actually achieve my opportunity, my issue, or my problem. You need to sort that out. So spend a bit of time, just think about action research and if it would be possible if you'd like to do it. Thank you for listening. That was this was a recorded lecture on observational research techniques, both participant observation and structured observation, and we also touched on action research. For any more information on these, any good research methods books, and you will, whatever module you are on at Pearson College, whatever level, you will have a core textbook. Please read up on these to get more depth and understanding. I'm just guiding you through kind of an upper level guidance on what these methods are and how you can use them, the pitfalls of these methods. If you think you want to use them, then fantastic. I suggest you always read the chapter in a good research methods book that will get you going and you get some depth and more insight. But thank you for listening, and there's other sessions that you can actually listen to in other research methods which may be very useful. Thank you.